So far, we have spoken about fetalization in the anthropoid apes and the human being in particular, and then also perhaps the newer concept of retardation, or the prolonging of growth and developmental events. When we think of retardation, we can say that the character of the different milestones that are met during development, and we'll speak here of human development right now, the milestones themselves do not change their character, but the timing of them is changed. So by that I mean, for instance, with the second dentition, that change of teeth is still just the change of teeth, or puberty is still just puberty. But the timing of those milestones is what has changed. The length of time from the onset of the second dentition to the time that the second dentition finishes, that timing is prolonged in the human being. The timing of puberty at around age 12 and the number of years that it takes sexual maturation to be complete, that is what is prolonged or retarded. So I wanted to be clear about that. The character of the events is the same, but the timing is what is different. And in the anthropoid apes and the various tribes of monkeys, we see that their timing, if we use the human being as the yardstick, their timing is compressed. The further we go down the series of primates, the more the timing of their different milestones is compressed into shorter amounts of time. As for fetalization is enabled to occur to a great extent by retardation. The fact that our development is so retarded allows certain fetalized characteristics to be maintained for a long time in that universal form that the human being tends to retain. For instance, the position of the foramen magnum, that great hole on the underside of the skull, is retained right into adulthood, whereas it is lost to a lesser or greater extent as we move down the scale of primates. The fact that they have lost these fetalized forms is due to the fact that they have specialized in one or the other direction, due to environmental or other factors, away from the universal structural plan that is maintained more fully by human beings. Let's move on to another aspect of this work. You will perhaps know that it was Ernst Haeckel who first kind of crystallized the thinking of his time about embryological development and evolution in his biogenetic law. He was not the first to come up with this law. It had been around for decades, even before Darwin. But he brought it into a clear form, and he promoted it aggressively, we could say. The biogenetic law states that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny in a shortened form, so that the life of the individual, the ontogeny, the life of the individual goes through again. It recapitulates the development that the species itself went through over evolutionary time, over millions of years. Ontogeny, the life of the individual, recapitulates phylogeny, the life of the species over evolutionary time. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny in a shortened form. This formulation did stimulate a great deal of research into embryology and into evolution, and so it served its function well. However, it was greatly criticized by anatomists and embryologists, and it was eventually shown to be not very reliable and only true in some cases. So by the 19 teens, it was pretty much discarded and let go of, although it was still taught in schools. Even in the 1960s, it was still taught in schools and will be known commonly by people. But there was another anatomist and embryologist who actually some decades earlier had put forward a perhaps more correct version of the biogenetic law. And that was the embryologist von Baer. Von Baer didn't believe that the forms of adults of given species in earlier epochs are shared by the current adult forms descended from that species. He did, however, say that the embryonic form of those earlier organisms could very well be shared by modern embryonic forms. I have a formulation of the law that we can call Baer's law. It goes like this. The traits that occur earliest in the course of embryonic development are the most universal and are characteristic of the broadest category of animals. Those traits that are followed by specialized traits belonging to ever more restricted groups of animal species, and traits unique to individual species appear last. So he speaks of these three phases, I guess you could say, and we can now turn again to that drawing that we looked at earlier on, that drawing that actually comes from Ernst Haeckel. Here we can again look at Baer's law. Again, he says that the traits that occur earliest in embryonic development, that would be these here in the top row, are the most universal and are characteristic of the broadest category of animals. The second row, these early traits are followed by specialized traits that belong to ever more restricted groups of animal species. And then the third row, and traits unique to individual species appear last. So with the aid of Baer's law, we can begin to see the meaning of this drawing by Ernst Haeckel. We see that in their earliest embryonic forms, all animals have a common origin. They have the same structural plan. But as they develop further, the different families of animals and the different species begin to distinguish themselves as they specialize. And those that depart from the generalized plan first are the least advanced in their organization. This is Baer's law.